As part of the Monitor Farm Legacy project, join Robbie Newlands at Cluny Farm in Murrayshire, previous Monitor farmer from 2010 to 2013, along with Kirsten Williams, leading beef and sheep consultant with SAC Consulting. They will discuss the current sheep system and how investments made since Robbie's term as a Monitor farmer has helped to increase lamb survival and the lamb numbers sold from the farm at Cluny.
So you finished Monitor Farm 2013.
Yep.
What has changed since that time?
We've changed from, we're still doing an outdoor lambing, but we're now taking the ewes and lambs in inside. We've built a shed to house the individual pens that we take them into, and we've got a shed. The same shed has an area of mixing pens where we get 10 ewes and the lambs for a day or so. So they're almost 2.5 to 3 days old by the time they're going out of the shed and away to a grass field. So it's meant that the lambs are a lot fitter going out to the field, and we've reduced the losses by doing that by quite a bit. And it's made it more pleasant for those looking after sheep for the first 2 or 3 days. At least they're under cover if the weather's not great.
So you're lambing in the middle of April, so this year you will have hit the weather really quite hard at lambing time.
We were actually fortunate. There was a week in the middle that wasn't too bad. Just prior to us starting was particularly cold and windy and horrible, and the tail end of the lambing wasn't great. Towards the end of May there was a week in the middle there, it wasn't too bad. We were actually okay. When we were at peak numbers we were okay. Can't complain too much because I know others had a lot worse at time.
So they're lambing outside, you're weaking them in with the bike as soon as they've lambed, you're making sure they're mothered up, their bellies are full of colostrum, there's nothing coming over them, they're in their individual pen for a day?
About a day. We're making sure they're suited, they get the rubber band on their tail and their nuts, and once they know they're fine, everything's going okay, the following day they'll go through into a mixing pen, and they're in there for a day and a half, just about that length of time, so that they're kind of edging towards a 2.5 days old by the time they're floating them out to a field from there. And usually by that stage, some of the pens will maybe stay a day longer if there's a few lambs that are needing a wee bit longer inside or the weather's not so great. But about 2.5 days inside.
And you've got the pen set up inside so that you can foster on quite easily. You've got your singles housed and your triplets.
The triplets and twins are in the field round the shed. There's about 30-35 acres round the shed, grass field, that the bulk of the ewes are in there, twins and triplets. The singles are penned up within the sheep handling pens in that bedded area, so that we're seeing if there's a single bearing ewe lambing, we'll try and grab her and lamb her into a bag and twin on a triplet. We've got 2 guys give us a hand at the peak of the lambing. They're here for kind of 18-20 days at the peak, and if there's a pen with that's sheep that's come in with triplets into an individual pen, we'll put a clamp on the pen so that it's visible. We've got about 100 pens, so you're not looking within the pens for a triplet. Put a clamp on the pen, you can spot a pen with a triplet within them, and you grab a lamb and twin it on, and hopefully it works. Not always, but most of the time it does.
So if you're now lambing inside, you've got 2 people help you at lambing time. Did you have 2 people as staff prior when you were lambing outside solely?
No, it was just with one full-time member of staff, was her and me before, but it's obviously taken a lot more work because you have each individual pen. We muck it out every time a ewe goes out, fresh bedding in for the next ewe. It is more work. It's but it is quite a bit more satisfying when you're seeing fit lambs going out rather than the thing maybe not quite as good as it should be.
And Lambing, when you're solely outside, you've got your things like hypothermia, you've got predation and such like. When you're inside, are you seeing any different to the causes of lamb losses at all?
Our lamb losses would have been mismothering before, because the lambs are going out very young into the next field, maybe getting a bit lost or whatever, mismothering, and maybe not getting as much attention to make sure they were sucking and whatever. Our losses now are much reduced. We're making lambs survive a lot better. I wouldn't say there's any one particular cause. Lambing times now were loss of lambs. I would say we lose from scanning to lambing a few. We'll lose them at this stage, an occasional lamb. When they're out in the field, you'll just get one occasionally, as you do with sheep. But there's no, I wouldn't say there's any specific area that we're losing a number of lambs at that you could say, right, we need to go there. I think we've gone past the specific losing them at the lambing time.
Yeah, and you've got,
unless we get really bad weather.
Yeah, and you've got your colostrum management, so you're making sure everything's full. You're on top of hygiene, that every pen's getting mucked out between occupant. They're not in for a long time, they're getting out, they're going on to clean grass. So you're really minimising your usuals like your joint ills, your watery mouths.
We do give them spectrum as they come into the shed. The lambs, they're lambed outside in the grass field and they immediately come inside, and they do get a squirt of 1 ml spectrum on the way into the shed, which will help with watery mouth or whatever else. But we haven't had too many problems with that. Didn't have a lot of joint ill. It varies year to year a wee bit, but very few lambs with joint ill. Shouldn't say things like that. That's good. It's been okay.
And so your singles are inside or close at hand. Are you finding that your triplet survival is higher then, for knowing that they're twinned on nice and quickly?
We didn't seem to hit too much problem with the lamb once it's twinned on. If you accept the wet adoption, generally they're fine, and you can tell within the first couple of hours if they're going to be happy or not. If they're happy within that first couple of hours, they seem to be fine going through. So I wouldn't say there's any much problem with that. We avoid like a plague feeding pet lambs. So any ewe that we don't have a single to put a triplet onto, if she's got 3 lambs and she's coping well, we have a wee field that we put them out into that wee field, and we'll feed the ewes quite heavily, put out creep feeder for lambs. And last year was the first time we'd really gone down that route, fed lambs right for day one, and the lambs did quite well. A hell of a lot easier than chasing them with bottles. Some boys left every triplet. That's not for me. I'd rather leave the ewe with them and feed her well until she gets the lamb's big enough that it can get on to creep feed itself.
And you started the monitor farm in 2010, so that's about 10-11 years ago. And that was just when you started scanning sheep, was then. What benefits have you found for scanning?
We started scanning because we were trying, at that time we had, prior to that we were lambing everything together unscanned out in the field, and we were walking them from one field to the next. Once we started the scanning, we shut the singles in the sheep handling pens with a view to trying to twin on triplets, because we were ending up with too many pet lambs. We were trying, some ewes will handle a triplet and get on okay, but quite a lot of them you end up with one that falls by the wayside or is not so good or whatever. So we penned in the singles after, because we knew by scanning which had singles, and then tried to twin on, and it's really gone from there. we then a few years later built a shed over the sheep handling pens and things, so that we could get them all into an individual pen, all into a mixing pen, and that's where we've ended up now.
And do you see savings in your pre-lambing nutrition for knowing who's a single, who's a twin, who's a triplet?
Probably not too much, because we don't tend to feed a lot of concentrate anyway, because we're lambing mid-April, and our general usage of a ewe roll for this 700 ewes we had this year, we've used 10 tonne, and it varies between 8 and 10 tonne, but by the time we're getting towards lambing, and where maybe the earlier guys are feeding them, we're starting to get some grass growing, and the ewes seem quite milky. Never any problem with milk. Ewes are, in fact, possibly the opposite. They're a wee bit full of milk, but we didn't tend to feed heavily anyway, so the singles, they don't get fed. The twins and triplets do, but it's not a huge amount of twins and triplets are getting fed.
So how early on are you introducing feed to them? Is that 4 weeks pre-lambing?
It's about 5, maybe 6 weeks, very gently for a start, and up a wee bit.
And then as soon as they're turned out to grass from the shed, that's it.
They're onto grass, yeah. Although this spring it was blooming cold and slow. It's the first time we've ever, with one batch with a wee bit tighter grass, we fed them for a while once they were out. But generally no, once they're out to grass, that's them onto grass. We don't feed them.
And a fantastic way to kind of assess how nutrition's going with the ewes is condition scoring them throughout the year, just to see where they are and if they're coping with milking, if they're coping with pregnancy and such like. How frequently are you condition scoring?
Probably at the times we're handling them, maybe more so than actually specifically taking them into condition score, but we look for condition score, I suppose, maybe coming towards tupping. We'll split them in 2 batches, and we'll put all the ones that are needing a bit, or we reckon is a wee bit on the thinner side, we'll put them to better grass, and the other ones just don't do ordinary grass. The thinner ones get the better grass. And then through the winter, if there's anything that we'll maybe split them again once we take the tops out, and adjust them so that the thinner lot are getting preferential grazing, if you like, because we're not actually feeding them through the winter. We did give them some, because it was quite hard this winter, with a lot of heavy frost. There wasn't much grass for a while. We gave them some draff, and I think probably draff, we started feeding them draff middle of January, because it was minus 17 or whatever, and the draff kept them going fine. He held the condition on them, and it's maybe something we'd do again, but quite often the ewes are happy just grazing around, just tidying up after over the winter.
So your draft's high in protein, slightly low in calcium, so it's great for putting milk onto them. So when you're saying they probably had too much milk, the draft's probably been a big contributor there.
Well, I would say that's a problem that we have just about every year. This year we fed the draft, but normally we don't. But because the ewes are getting a bite of grass just coming up to lambing time, grass at that time of year is pretty potent, and it definitely puts a bag of milk on them.
Yeah. And what is your grassland management? As the fields of ewes and lambs are turned onto left bare through the winter, does it overwinter gimmers, or what happens with that grass?
The sheep generally, gimmers and ewes, are spread across the whole farm, and we try and shift them about once a week, because even in the winter time, if we graze it and take them off, there's a tiny wee bit of growth, and that wee bit of growth is good for them the next time. So they get spread right around the farm, because we've got cows and ewes. There's more acres than just the grazing where the sheep were the previous summer. So they kind of graze round the farm all winter, and right across the fields they're going on to in the springtime as well. We should maybe keep them clear, but it's generally by the time we're lambing, when we're putting them back out onto those fields, even though they've been grazed over winter, because we're nae lambing till April, we're nae putting out sheep back onto them till 2/3 of the way through April. We're starting to get a wee bit of growth, which is enough to keep the ewes going.
The lambs are weaned when they're about 14 to 16 weeks old.
Yeah.
They're then put back out to grass. What is your target market? What's the management for them?
We're drawing lambs as they come fat. All the lambs have, for a number of years now, gone to Woodheads at Turriff, and we're aiming for a 21 kilo carcass, and I think we always end up with 1 or 2 over to get your average at 21, but we're pretty close to a 21 kilo average. I can't remember exactly what it is now, but it's pretty close to it.
And how frequently after weaning are you drawn through them?
If the lambs are, depends. If we've moved them on to sweds or whatever, we'll leave them for a wee while because of the changeover, but generally once a fortnight. Once we're drawing lambs, once a fortnight. We sometimes will get, lambs seem to come in batches and droves, you know, that we'll get a big batch and then maybe not so many for a while, and then what we have done the last 3, well, this is our 3rd year, once we've got them onto forage and stuff, we've put them onto hoppers with maximum barley, our own barley, and we were using a pellet, but it's quite expensive. We had our own barley, enough of our own barley to do it. We've tried it many years ago on popcorn barley, and we lost lambs. Occasionally, you know, they would take a bellyful and you get dead lambs. The maximum barley, we tried it because of the high pH of the maximum barley. It doesn't lend itself maybe quite so badly to acidosis as the popcorn barley would do. So for the last 2 years we've fattened the lambs on our own popcorn maximum barley, with a mineral added through it, and it's just whole barley straight into hopper. And this year, this is the first time we've put out hoppers with the lambs at this stage. Just the hoppers went out yesterday. We've put in a pre-prepared pellet in the hopper to get the lambs to go to it, and we've bought a ton of pellets, and there's 1,200 odd lambs, so we've just put in a wee bit for a start to attract them, and then our own maximum barley with minerals through it to finish them.
Okay.
So
it's quite interesting. There's quite a lot of people actually looking to creep that don't usually creep. It's been such a hard, long winter, and the ewes' condition is generally down.
yeah,
Grass has been affected with it as well, and it's been very, very slow in coming this year.
yeah,
And creep just gives you don't always have to do it. It's one of those kind of plan B situations that you can bring it in when you need it, and you can take it out as soon as you don't need it as well. So your lambs, you were saying that you're drawing every 2 weeks when you get going. When do you start drawing them?
we're usually probably September
Okay.
before we're starting to draw lambs.
So there'd be about 5 months by that point.
Yeah. We've always been quite envious of guys that seem to get everything away off grass, and we've always struggled to do that. And I don't know if that's because we're lambing a bit later, or if it's because we're the other guys are maybe feeding them at grass, I don't know. But we're just leaving them on grass. As I say, we've put out the feeders this time. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out. So it's just a trial, and we've got our own barley to trial it with, so it was going to give it a go. Generally September time.
When you're drawing them, have you got weigh cells?
Yes.
And are you weighing them at weaning to see what weight they're at?
We haven't been, no.
It'd be well worth weighing them at weaning, see where they're at, and if you can, I know you like one main batch of sheep, but if you can kind of draw them out on their weights, even if you have heavies and lights, and then just try and monitor the performance, and then that just gives you that kind of clue. Is there something else going on? Is there a worm problem? Is the grass run out of steam? And it just kind of lets you almost set your baseline and then see where it is. Because if you're not weighing at weaning, you don't know if actually the ewes are running dry of milk early. Should they have been weaned earlier? And it just kind of gives you that extra bit of information or bit of data to work off. And if they're in anyway, it's not an extra job.
It's not. It wouldn't be difficult to do within our system. No.
Yeah. And you're saying that you put them onto Swedes. You could always look at, if you split your lambs off to your heavies and your lights would be your long keep lambs. So those could be identified as the ones that go into the forage, whereas your heavier ones are the ones that you know that should be reaching the market at a quicker pace as well.
We're tending to run the lambs in a couple of batches anyway, just because of the numbers, because trying to get the whole lot in one go into the pens to handle to go through for fat, so to split them into groups by weight wouldn't be a difficult thing, because we've got groups anyway. We just need to weigh them to do that, but that's certainly something we could look at.
So the main changes, I guess, you've put up your cover for lambing time. You've got the ability to have your singles close at hand for weight twinning. You've reduced your lamb mortality by a fair bit and increased the lambs sold per year from the ewes. You're managing their health and that they're on a vaccination programme. And you're managing your grass and that they're moving to a fresh bite every 10 days.
We're not in a paddock grazing system, but we're kind of halfway house, I would say. So I guess that the last bit of what further can you do with the sheep is there any part of it that you feel is a costly part to the enterprise that could be tweaked further? The most costly part of our system is buying gimmers. But if we want to stay with a mule ewe, that's where we are. The only way to get around that would probably be to go in with a closed flock and breed our own. But that in itself creates a lot of complications. It's a bit like keeping our own heifers. We buy in our own heifers for cattle as well. Buy in heifers for replacements for cattle as well. It takes away the need to have separate groups. We have 700 ewes that are treated all the same. It's one batch. The lambs are all the same. The lambs all get killed. There's no. It makes it simple. For me, it needs to be simple.
That's it, because when you get into breeding your own, it's another park, another group of sheep throughout the winter.
Trying to keep separate lots and everything else, and with the best will in the world, they break through fences and get together. And,
So I guess then for the sheep, you're at quite a happy place. You're at an efficient, it's working. Obviously sales have been phenomenal this year, and the price that you've been getting for lambs has really helped towards paying back for your shed. You've got the handling facilities now that make life a lot easier as well. So I'd say the future looks bright for your flock.
It's can you ever say you're in a happy place with sheep?